وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So last time, then you remember we got to the section regarding the hijrah, when the Prophet ﷺ did the hijrah, migrated from Mecca to Medina. And we mentioned that when that hijrah was done, it was after the Prophet ﷺ had lived in Mecca for another 13 years after the prophethood began. So the prophethood began when he was 40. He then stayed in Mecca another 13 years, and when he was 53, then the hijrah was done from Mecca to Medina. And that's what it said in the poetry, فَجَاءَ طَيْبَةَ الرِّضَى يَقِينًا إِذْ كَمَّلِ الثَّلَاثَ وَالْخَمْسِينَ, that he came to Medina with certainty after he had completed 53, meaning after 53 years of age. That's when he made the hijrah from Mecca to Medina. And what on a Monday, في يوم الاثنين ودام فيها 10 سنين كملا نحكيها. So it was on a Monday when that hijrah occurred. كان دخوله المدينة في يوم الاثنين كما قال الحاكم تواترت الأخبار أن خروجه كان يوم الاثنين ودخوله المدينة كان يوم الاثنين. So there are multiple narrations that mentioned he left Mecca on a Monday and that he arrived in Medina on a Monday. And then it mentioned وَدَامَ فِيهَا 10 سِنِينَ كُمَّلًا نَحْكِيهَا, that after the Prophet ﷺ moved to Medina, then he lived there another 10 years. 10 more years in Medina, and then after that is when he died. 10 years more in Medina, and then after that, death came to him. So how old would he have been when he died? He left Mecca when he was 53, lived another 10 years in Medina, so he's going to be 63 years old when he died. فدام فيها 10 سنين إلى أن توفي عليه الصلاة والسلام. He lived another 10 years there until he died. كملا أي كاملات, 10 complete years. Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما mentioned بعث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ل40 سنة. The Prophet ﷺ was made a prophet at the age of 40. فمكث بمكة 13 سنة يوحى إليه. And then he stayed in Mecca for another 13 years and revelation was coming to him. ثم أمر بالهجرة. Then he was commanded to make the hijrah. After that, 13 years of remaining there and giving da'wah to the mushrikun, and very few accepted. So then he was given the command to make the hijrah. فهاجر 10 سنين. And so then he made that migration and remained there for another 10 years. وَمَاتَ وَهُوَ ابْنُ 63. And he died when he was at the age of 63. that mentioned in the narration of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma. Then in the poetry it says, أكمل في الأولى صلاة الحضر من بعد ما جمع فاسمع خبري. So you remember we touched upon this last time regarding the prayers. Initially in Mecca, the prayer was legislated as 2 rak'ahs. So Fajr was 2, Dhuhr was 2, Asr was 2, Isha was 2, and Maghrib was always 3. Then when they moved to Medina, أكمل في الأولى صلاة الحضر. The prayer was then completed into 4. So Dhuhr was changed from 2 into 4 raka'at, and Asr from 2 to 4 raka'at, and Isha from 2 to 4 raka'at. Fajr stayed the same because you are supposed to lengthen the recitation, read a bit longer. So the time it takes is similar to a 4 raka'ah prayer anyway. And Maghrib has always stayed as 3 as the odd numbered prayer during the day. And that was mentioned in the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu anha fi Sahihain in al-Bukhari and Muslim. She mentioned فرضت الصلاة ركعتين ثم هاجر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ففرضت 4 وتركت صلاة السفر على الأولى. That the prayer was obligated as 2 raka'at to begin with. Then when the messenger made the migration, it was obligated as 4 raka'as, and the prayer of the travel was left the same. So when they moved to Medina, the prayers were doubled except Fajr. Except if you were a traveler. If you were traveling, then even after they made the hijrah to Medina, a traveler still only prayed the original amount. 2 at Dhuhr, 2 at Asr, 2 at Isha. So for the traveler, it remained upon the original ruling. But for those who are resident, after they moved to Medina, it was doubled into 4 rak'ahs. من بعد ما جمع أي أن صلاته عليه الصلاة والسلام الجمعة إنما كانت في المدينة بعد هجرته إليها، وقبل أن يهاجر إليها كانت صلاة الجمعة تقام في المدينة. So when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam he made the hijrah to Medina, then he prayed the Jum'ah prayer there. That was the first Jum'ah prayer, as we mentioned, en route from Quba to Medina. However, was there any Jum'ah prayer established in Medina before his arrival? Yes, because the Muslims were there. The ones who had done the Pledge of Allegiance a year earlier, they were Muslims. They were living in Medina, they were praying, they were doing Jum'ah. So when we're talking about the first Jum'ah, we're talking about in terms of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Otherwise, before that, the Jum'ah used to be prayed by those Ansar who were already there. Ibn Kathir, he mentioned, this is where we left off last time, ولما ارتحل عليه الصلاة والسلام من قبى وهو راكب ناقته القصوى وذلك يوم الجمعة أدركه وقت الزوال وهو في دار بني سالم بن عوف فصلى بالمسلمين الجمعة هنالك في واد يقال له وادي رانوناء فكانت أول جمعة صلاها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بالمسلمين بالمدينة أو مطلقا، لأنه والله أعلم لم يكن يتمكن هو وأصحابه بمكة من الاجتماع حتى يقيموا بها جمعة ذات خطبة وإعلان بموعظة، وما ذاك إلا لشدة مخالفة المشركين وأذيتهم إياه. Ibn Kathir had said that when the messenger traveled out from Quba, because when he came doing the hijrah from Mecca, they first stopped at Quba and he built Masjid Quba. Then Ibn Kathir says when he was moving on from there to go into Medina, which is another couple of miles after Quba, as he was heading down, the time for Jum'ah prayer came in. So they stopped and they prayed in Vali Ranuna, en route between Quba and the central Medina area. So that was the first Jum'ah that the Messenger prayed in Medina. Or it could be said, Ibn Kathir mentions, possibly the first Jum'ah ever that the Messenger led. Because prior to that in Mecca, it wasn't possible. It seems Ibn Kathir says it is unlikely they were establishing an open public Jumu'ah prayer in Mecca because of the opposition of the mushrikeen against them. It wasn't possible. So this could be the first Jumu'ah that the Messenger established, Ibn Kathir mentions. So, coming back slightly to his arrival in Quba then, ثم بنى المسجد في قبى ومسجد المدينة الغراء. So these are the two mosques that the Prophet ﷺ built. Masjid Quba first. What you see now, the completely white mosque. It's completely white when you see the pictures of it, Masjid Quba. So that is the first mosque that he built when he arrived in that area in Quba. And as it was mentioned again by Ibn Kathir, what is likely is that he only stayed there a few nights, because there were differences of opinion about how long the Messenger stayed in Quba before going to Medina. And the correct opinion was only a few nights, maybe 4 nights. Then they left on the Friday. Route, they prayed the Jum'ah, the first Jum'ah. If he had stayed there more than a week, then the first Jum'ah would have been prayed in Quba. So that seems to be accurate, that maybe it was only a few days that he stayed there and then they moved on to Medina. But of course, that is differed about. In the books of Seerah, it is differed about how long the Messenger actually stayed in Quba before then moving on to Medina, central Medina. So Masjid Quba, it mentions in the Quran, لَمَسْجِدٌ أُسِّسَ عَلَى التَّقْوَى مِنْ أَوَّلِ يَوْمٍ أَحَقُّ أَن تَقُومَ فِيهِ. A mosque that is built upon taqwa from the very foundation, from the first day, is better and more deserving that you stand and pray within it. Many of the scholars, they say this is in reference to Masjid Quba. And that is in regards to the story of Masjid al-Dhirar. That mosque known as Masjid al-Dhirar, that was built by the munafiqun, the hypocrites, the munafiqun, who had nifaq i'tiqadi in their hearts. They did not even accept Islam and Tawheed or anything. They were kuffar, pretending to be Muslims. Those munafiqun built a mosque near Masjid Quba. It wasn't far from Masjid Quba, very close to Masjid Quba. And they made their excuses because it maybe looked a bit unusual. Why build another mosque right next to Quba? Not even that far from it. But they made their excuses at the time. It says in the books of Seerah, they said, but sometimes it can be raining or it can be difficult for us to walk up to Quba. We need something even more local right here. So they built the mosque. And once they built it, they then sent an invite to the Prophet ﷺ for him to come and pray in their mosque. Of course, this was not a mosque. This is the hypocrites, the munafiqun. Why had they built this place which resembled a mosque? But of course, it is not a mosque. It is the munafiqun building it upon their kufr. Why though?
then they can divide the Muslims.
That was one reason. Also, yeah, it's mentioned in some of the books of Seerah. The Munafiqun, they obviously wanted to make their plans and plots against the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To do that, in those days, there's no WhatsApp or anything. To do that, you have to physically meet up to talk and to make plans. The only way in those days was to physically meet up, have meetings to make your plans and your plots. So if they were seen regularly having meetings in their houses, it's possible people may have begun to get a bit suspicious. Why these particular group of people always having a meeting at his house? We see them every week, and we always see them at his house every week, and they're always getting together, always till late at night. And what are they doing? What are they talking about? Why getting together so often? What's all these gatherings in their houses late night and all? So there may have been some suspicion that may have arisen. So then they decided that why don't we build a mosque? Because in a mosque, people can get together any time of the day, any time of the night. Does anybody get suspicious? It's a mosque. They can get together at night. People will just think they're going there to pray their night prayer, tahajjud, whatever it is. They can get there during the day. People will say it's the prayer time. And they stayed there. Maybe they had a lesson. It's a mosque. It's a public gathering place. So nobody would get suspicious. They can go meet in the mosque as often as they want. Pretend it was a lesson. Pretend it was this or that. Night prayer, whatever. So they said, okay, let's build a mosque. Then we can use that as a base for the Muslims. So they built that mosque, and to get their mosque validated so that nobody would have any suspicion on them at all, they invited the messenger to come and pray in there. Because if the messenger came and prayed in their mosque, after that, would anybody have any suspicion on them? Not at all. They would say the messenger, Rasulullah, came and prayed here in the mosque. He came and met with them and sat with them and prayed in the mosque. No suspicion would be left. So they invited him. But at the time, the Prophet ﷺ was not in Medina. He was away on one of the battles, one of the excursions, and the message got to him. So he sent back a messenger telling them, I'm away on an excursion, like a battle, etc. When I come back, then I'll come. I'll pray in this mosque. New mosque has been built. I'll come and pray in it. So then it's mentioned when he was returning, then, when he was coming back from that expedition, from the excursion, en route as coming back, revelation came to him, highlighting to him that mosque. And that is these ayat, La Masjidun Ussisa ala Taqwa, telling him about that, highlighting the reality that this was not actually a mosque. It is the munafiqun who have built that Masjid al-Dharar, as it is known as. And so the messenger, when he realized that, obviously he was not going to go and pray inside of that mosque. He sent the companions to go and destroy it, to burn it down. Because it isn't a mosque. It was not built upon sincerity to Allah, even though the building looked like a mosque, but it was not built upon ikhlas. It was not built upon sincerity to Allah. So it was not built as a masjid. It was not built as a place of worship for Allah. It was not a mosque. There was no intention for it to be a mosque by those who built it whatsoever. Rather, they wanted to destroy Islam. So the messenger ordered for it to be destroyed. And they went and they burnt it down and they destroyed it. Later on, it mentions in the Seerah that the neighborhood of Quba, the people who lived in that area around Quba, they used to use the site of that so-called mosque that the Munafiqun had built which was now destroyed. The site, they used to use it as a... Can we mention this story before? Definitely, people shaking their head. Definitely. Years ago, but definitely. Sort of. As a rubbish dump. You know, these recycling centers and things where you go throw your rubbish. They used to go use it as a rubbish dump. Their rubbish and things, they would go dump it on that site. The site where those munafiqun